Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're delving into a chapter of American history that is often overlooked but carries profound lessons about justice, fear, and the consequences of wartime hysteria. We're going to talk about the forced relocation and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, focusing specifically on the devastating economic impact it had on an entire community. Imagine this. You've built a life from the ground up. You own a farm that your family has cultivated for generations, a successful grocery store that serves your neighborhood, or a small business you poured your heart and soul into. You are an American citizen. Your children were born here, and you've contributed to your community in every way imaginable. Then, in an instant, everything is stripped away. This was the reality for over 120,000 people of Japanese descent living on the west coast of the United States, following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Driven by a storm of racial prejudice, wartime fear, and a failure of political leadership, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. This order authorized the military to designate areas from which any or all persons may be excluded. Though the order didn't mention any specific ethnicity, it was applied almost exclusively to Japanese Americans. What followed was a swift and brutal uprooting. Families were given mere days, sometimes just a week, to dispose of their entire lives. Think about the logistics of that. How do you sell a house, a farm, a business, and all your personal belongings in less than a week? The answer is, you can't. Not for a fair price, anyway. This created a perfect storm for predatory buyers and opportunists. People swooped in, offering pennies on the dollar for assets that had taken a lifetime to build. A family farm worth tens of thousands of dollars might be sold for a few hundred. A thriving business was liquidated for a fraction of its value. Cars, furniture, heirlooms, all sold in a desperate rush or simply abandoned. For many, there was no choice but to entrust their property to neighbors or acquaintances, praying it would be waiting for them upon their return. Often it wasn't. The economic devastation was immediate and catastrophic. Japanese Americans had carved out a significant niche in West Coast agriculture, particularly in California. They were pioneers in farming techniques, responsible for a huge portion of the state's fruit and vegetable crops. Their removal left a massive void in the agricultural economy. More importantly, it erased generations of accumulated wealth and stability for the community itself. These weren't just assets being lost, it was the American dream being dismantled. These families were then herded into temporary, so-called assembly centers, often hastily converted racetracks or fairgrounds, where they lived in horse stalls still smelling of manure. From there, they were transported to 10 remote, desolate relocation centers, more accurately described as incarceration camps, scattered across the interior of the country. These camps were surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. Families were crammed into single-room barracks with no privacy and communal facilities. The life they had known was gone. Their professions, their skills, their ambitions, all put on hold indefinitely. Doctors, lawyers, artists, and farmers were now reduced to numbers, their potential squandered behind fences in places like Manzanar in California, Heart Mountain in Wyoming, and Topaz in Utah. While incarcerated, some were able to work within the camps for meager wages, often performing agricultural labor or other manual tasks. But this was a far cry from the economic independence they had once enjoyed. They were essentially a captive labor force, stripped of their freedom and their financial futures. The psychological toll of this economic ruin was immense, compounding the trauma of losing their homes and liberty. When the war ended and the camps were finally closed in 1945 and 1946, the incarcerated were released, often with just $25 and a train ticket. They returned to a world that had moved on without them. Many found their homes vandalized, their farms repossessed for unpaid taxes, and their businesses shuttered for good. The savings they had managed to hold on to were depleted after years without income. They had to start over from scratch, but this time they faced not only the initial racial prejudice, but also the added stigma of having been imprisoned by their own government. The economic ladder they had so successfully climbed had been kicked out from under them. It's a loss that is difficult to quantify, but is estimated to be in the billions of dollars in today's money. This wasn't just a temporary setback, it was an economic amputation that affected Japanese American families for generations. The story doesn't end there, however. In the decades that followed, the Japanese American community fought tirelessly for justice. Their efforts culminated in the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan. The act issued a formal apology from the U.S. government and provided a redress payment of $20,000 to each surviving internee. While this was a monumental and symbolic victory, it was, for many, too little, too late. No amount of money could truly compensate for the lost years, the stolen property, the shattered dreams, and the deep emotional scars. The apology acknowledged a grave injustice fueled by race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. The economic devastation inflicted upon Japanese Americans during World War II is a stark reminder of how quickly civil liberties can erode in times of crisis. It shows us that economic security is intrinsically linked to freedom and justice. When a group is targeted and stripped of their assets, they are also stripped of their power, their voice, and their place in society. This history is not just about the past. It's a vital lesson for the present and the future. It compels us to remain vigilant against prejudice and to question policies born of fear rather than reason. The story of these families is one of incredible resilience, but it's also a cautionary tale we must never forget. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this important and somber topic. Understanding these chapters of our history is crucial to building a more just and equitable future. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'll see you next time.